Welcome to the SicEm365 Baseball Podcast with Levi Caraway. Presented by T&G Chemical and Supply. Let us be your one-stop shop for all of your business supplies at 3328 Franklin Avenue in Waco. Serving Central Texas since 1967.
What's up, everybody? Welcome to another episode of the SicEm365 Baseball Podcast, coming to you on a Thursday morning, the final series of the season, actually, this weekend. So, man, it flies by. I guess I'll start with I wish that we would have had one more week left in this year to kind of see what this team could be, what they could do in the Big 12 tournament or whatever. But they didn't make it, and that's unfortunate because that was a major goal for this year's squad. I mean, arguably that was the only goal. On paper, I mean, there's a lot of other things like, seeing a bunch of guys play well and playing your best baseball toward the end of the year that I wanted to see. But the main goal on paper was to make the Big 12 tournament. And that didn't happen after getting swept in Norman this past weekend, and some other things such as Tech canceling their series finale against Oklahoma State because of weather and whatnot. So it became winning percentage instead of final record. But I mean, even if they had lost, I mean, Baylor would have to sweep UCF this weekend. That's probably not going to happen. But I mean, it's important to go out into the summer on a high note, I suppose, for the team this weekend. But I'm not going to focus on that as much in today's little episode because the series doesn't really mean that much. I think one of the main things would be just what are they going to do going into the offseason, and yeah, I mean, what I took away from this year, and I think you start with coming into the year, the pitching staff was arguably the biggest question mark. I mean, when you're relying on underclassmen to throw 50% of your innings, it's usually not a recipe for success. And I think for the first month and a half of the season, they held up better than I anticipated. I thought some guys did some really good things, and then in this last 3-4 weeks, just everybody, the younger guys especially, seem to hit a wall, which just naturally kind of happens. I mean, it's their first year in college. It's a grind. It's a mental grind, and I mean, I remember that, and I was never a student athlete, and so a few years back, I'm not that old, but yeah, I mean, those guys you could kind of tell that the season was wearing down on them and whatnot, and then just like that, a flip of a switch, and then all the other older guys are struggling, and they're not being able to throw strikes consistently, and Mason Marriott who's been fantastic all season, has had kind of a couple bad outings toward the end of the year. And when your Friday night guys getting shelled in the first couple innings, I mean, there's not much you can do. And then Colin McKinney has been struggling with command in recent weeks, and he's had a phenomenal season as well. Yeah, and then Mason Green struggled toward the end of the year. You throw Ethan Calder into the starting rotation. He's had some good moments. I mean, he's had an incredible year as well, but didn't get much help from his defense over these past 2 weeks and whatnot. So yeah, I mean, it is what it is. Like, the pitching staff just really struggled the end of the year. And I mean, the lineup with all the injuries was never gonna blow the doors off or anything like that. And then a couple weeks ago, Wesley Jordan goes down with the concussion, and just after that, just kind of took the air out of the lineup. And I think I've been thinking about this in the last couple of days. I think had Baylor, had they not had injuries to the lineup, I think this team would be closer to 500. Would they have made the Big 12 tournament? Yeah, I think so. But would they have been a bubble team? Would they have done any potential damage in the NCAA tournament? No. They don't have enough pitching. I mean, regardless, like I said, I think the first month and a half of the season was surprising to me because the pitching held up incredibly well. And once the season waned on and things got tough and the pitching really, really hit a wall, like I was mentioning, I think that's who I envisioned what they were going to be coming into the year. And yeah, I mean, they're pretty much dead last in the conference in every single pitching statistic, and that's going to be a huge thing that they're going to have to address this offseason. I think I've mentioned this throughout my writing and whatnot this year, but I think they do have the bones to have a NCAA tournament caliber lineup next year. I think if you have all your guys returning, and I've heard nothing but positive things in that regard, and so you have a really good group of outfielders with Wesley Jordan, Enzo Apodaca, and Ty Johnson. And you potentially have Hunter Simmons coming back, who hit 300 last year, was just on an absolute tear before he was lost for the season. he would elect to medically redshirt this year and come back the following year. And then you have Gavin Brzezowski, who's had into the season really well in his sophomore season last year and was hurt this entire year. And I think they were working him out at first base in the spring. And so maybe that's a position change that he would make this summer. Who knows? But that's a really good group of guys. And you have Hunter Duplansky, who's had an up and down year, but has had really good moments. Tyreek Kemp, who really struggled to start the year, but this last month he's kind of come on at the plate. And I think his glove is he has an elite glove. He makes some mental mistakes at times, but I think that's something you can clean up. And then you'll have Jack Little returning, who is supposed to be the starting second baseman this year, and Court Castle behind the plate. And you have a few guys like Braden Buchanan, who's had some positive moments. So yeah, I think there's a good core group of guys there if they all return. But the pitching staff, they're going to need a lot of help. They're going to need a lot of work. And I just don't think you can put yourself in a position where you're relying, because I mean, last toward the end of last year, when I would ask Coach Thompson about adding pitchers in the summer, he'd be like, well, we have Colin McKinney coming back, we have Tanner Duke coming in, we have a lot of freshmen coming in. And not to say that's a wrong approach or anything, but I think you saw that didn't necessarily work. And Mitch is a very smart person. I mean, he's been around the game for his entire life. He knows what it takes to win. And I think also, not to say that the window is closing, not saying that at all, but most of those guys who I mentioned that are coming back in the lineup are all going to be seniors next year. So you got to take advantage of that, and you got to supplement the talent in the lineup with additions in the portal on the mound. And so that'll be something to follow. And I'll write a ton more about that this offseason and whatnot. And if you haven't filled out the end of the year survey, go do that, please. You can find that in the UCF game thread. I would appreciate that, so we can have that article ready early next week. But yeah, I mean, this series doesn't really mean much, so I'm kind of just looking ahead here. But I think one of the positive things about this season was there were some guys that really took advantage of their opportunity throughout with the injuries. Danny Altman comes to mind, Cole Posey comes to mind. Those guys weren't expected to play a ton this year for different reasons. And Posey obviously dealing with the injury early in the spring, but both had really good years at the plate. I'm really impressed by their kind of ability to overcome and just plug in their, just being plugged in and playing at a really high level when their name was called. And so I think that was one of the more impressive things about that. And yeah, I thought the lineup, I mean, despite all their injuries, they kind of, I don't want to say they held their own, but they did about the best they could do throughout the spring. And once when Wes Jordan kind of went down a couple of weeks ago, that felt like the final blow to them. But yeah, I think there's definitely something to build on there. Ty Johnson, really good year. Enzo Apodaca, really good year, probably all Big 12 guy. So yeah, I mean, that's super encouraging for the future. It's just going to come down to the pitching staff next year, and I think the coaching staff realizes that, and it'll be up to them to make those needs and get those guys in this summer. So yeah, I think that's pretty much all I have on that note. Yeah, I mean, missing the Big 12 tournament, obviously a big loss, but it is what it is. Without the injuries, they probably make it. Not 100% sure with that, but yeah, I think they do. And so it's always going to be tough to look at this year because you're always going to be thinking like what could have been in a way. Because I mean, everybody's going to blame Coach Thompson. Everybody's going to blame, and yeah, they should have made the tournament. Injury with that's embarrassing. I'm not trying to make an excuse for that because regardless, they should have made the conference tournament. It's not that big of an ask. I mean, they lost 11 straight games in Big 12 play to end the year. And that's on them. And they got swept by a terrible Houston team early in the year, and you can't take those things back. But I think Coach Thompson was talking about this yesterday. It definitely kind of felt like he never got to see what this team could be because of all the injuries. And he's right. And I felt that way too, because I think there was some really talented guys that the fans didn't really get to see this year. And so who knows, it'll be a very important offseason, and I will stay in touch with you guys. And I appreciate Mark George and our sponsors at TNG Chemical. And if you're not a SicEm365 premium member, make sure you do that. I have all the latest information on the baseball program on the premium side, as well as game articles, feature stories. And yeah, the offseason should be a fun and interesting time because it's going to be a really important one. And I think the coaching staff recognizes that, and it'll be interesting. So I'll talk to you guys soon. I don't know when the next time will be because of this end of the season, but anyway, I will see you guys soon. Y'all have a great weekend.
TNG can, and here's why. To say my wife and I have a lot to clean is an understatement. So we go to T&G Chemical, where the pros know what cleaning solutions to use and give us detailed instructions on exactly how to use them. We never got that kind of advice from any other stores. And the prices at T&G are great. From general household cleaners to odor control solutions for our pets. We go to T&G Chemical and Supply. That's why.
T&G Chemical and Supply. That's why.